Hi guys, in this video I will show you how to use a vector from the C++ standard library. The vector class implements the ArrayList abstract data type. If you're curious how the vector works internally, you can check out my video on ArrayList. I put a link in the description below. In order to use a vector in your program, you need to include vector at the top. Vector is part of the standard namespace. So I'll declare a new vector using standard : then vector. And then for the template argument, I use integer. And I use the identifier v just for simplicity. V could be any identifier. You could use numbers, scores, whatever represents the values stored in the vector. In my case, I now have a vector of integers. You can think of a vector just like a dynamic array. We don't have to specify a size. As we add elements, the vector automatically expands to accommodate all the elements that we add. I can add a new element using the pushback function. So pushback 53, for example, adds 53 to the vector. I can add another integer by calling pushback a second time, for example 75. I can call pushback as many times as I need to add integers to the vector. Whenever I call pushback, this will add a new integer at the end of the vector. So here now the integer stores 53, 75 and 23. I can use the vector similar like an array. So if I want to output elements, I can use a for loop and I initialize I to 0, I less than v.size. This gives me the current number of elements in the vector, and then I plus plus, and then I output the elements. And I can access the vector with the square brackets and the index. The index, again, just like an array, starts at 0. Now when I run this, this will give me the output of the elements that are currently stored in the vector. You can see it down here. It has now 53, 75 and 23. I can also add, or rather insert, an element anywhere in the vector. This can be done with the insert function. This works by calling v.insert and then v.begin, get the beginning of the vector, and then you can specify an offset, similar like an index. So if I want to add it right before 23, I can use the offset of 2. And then the second argument will be the integer that I add. Let's say I want to add 99. So think of an array. This one is index 0. This one is index 1. This one is index 2. If I insert at index 2, this will push 23 one further to index 3. So if I run it again, we should see the output of 53, 75, 99 and 23. If you want to insert a new element at the very front of the vector, you can call insert v.begin and then let's say 11. This will add 11 in front of 53 in the vector. So running this again, you can see the output below. You can also delete elements from the vector. The easiest function would be pop back. This removes the last element in the vector. So running this will now remove 23 from this vector. You can see now that the last element is 99. You can also remove a particular element at any index in the vector. You can do this with the erase function. The erase works similar like the insert function. So I can do v.begin. And let's say 75, this would be an index 2. So I do begin plus 2. And when I run this, you can now see that 75 was erased or removed from the vector. If you want to get a particular element, I already showed you this in the loop here. You can do v and then square brackets and just specify the index. For example, v1 would give you the value at 1. When I output this and run this, you can see that this now outputs 53, which is the value stored at index 1 of the vector. Next, I will show you how to pass a vector to a function and how to iterate over the elements of a vector using an iterator. For that, I create a new function called print that expects the vector as argument. Note that I will change this parameter later to use a constant reference. For now, I will just keep it very simple to just use a regular vector parameter. I implement this function below, and here I first output a square bracket. This marks the beginning of the vector. I use a for loop And in the initialization part, I declare an instance of the iterator. Here I use vector, the template argument integer, double colon, and then iterator. I use the identifier iter and I initialize it to vector.begin. Note that vector again is the identifier, so this could be anything, whatever you chose for the parameter up here. Then I do iter not equal v.end. So I want to continue iterating over the elements as long as I don't hit the end of the vector. And then I increment iter at the end. In each iteration, I want to output the value that the iterator points to. So I use standard cout and then go to the location that the iterator points to. After the for loop, I will output a square bracket followed by a line break to mark the end of the vector. Now let's call this and see what the output looks like. So I call print, pass in the vector to the print function. And when I run this, what you will notice is that I have the square brackets, but I don't have any spaces. You can see the square brackets here. So what I'll do is I add a line break before. So running this again, I now have it in a new line. What I also want to add is the comma. So what I do here is if the iterator does not point to the beginning of the vector, in that case, I output a comma and a space. Basically, if it's not the very first argument, I output a comma and a space. So running this again, I now get the proper output that I expect. 11, 53, and 99. And with the brackets, I can see this is the full values stored in the vector. Now, in general, you want to avoid just passing in the vector like this, because this copies the entire vector and passes it by value. What you want to do instead is use a constant reference. So here I use the const keyword and then use the ampersand to use a reference. Now I have to do the same to the function implementation. So I do const and reference. So this passes in now by reference instead of copying all the values. And what you notice is that I have a conversion issue here because begin now returns a constant iterator, because this is a constant reference. So what I have to do is I have to update the iterator that I use here to a const iterator. This makes sure that the iterator cannot modify anything in the vector. Now running this, I get the same output, but I don't use pass by value, so I don't have to copy the entire vector when I call the function, which is much faster. And I specify that it's constant. I don't plan to modify anything. I really just try to iterate over the vector and output its values. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.